right now, as I mentioned this morning, we're going to hear a little bit of a different perspective in a conversational format. Mike Cannon is going to lead a fireside chat. As John said, we didn't. It's not quite Christmas. We couldn't put the whole set up here with the fire and everything else. But we'll use our imaginations for those here in the room and those that are streaming online. For those that don't know, we're streaming this event right now online as well. And there's actually quite a nice audience that's watching online. So thank you for those that are watching from home. One just quick announcement I want to make. I told the story this morning a little bit about how this region is really already leading in kind of regional collaboration, getting national awards, national recognition, and international participation in some cases. One of the things that's pretty cool, if you haven't noticed, one of the very first tables as you come in is advertising event called Smart City Connect. Tech Connect is the parent organization that runs this conference. It's a national smart city conference. It's really the premier smart city conference in the United States. And based on a lot of the things that we talked about this morning and the energy and the momentum, that event is coming to Raleigh this spring. So if you want to learn more about that event, go ahead and sign up. Talk to Rich. Is Rich in the room somewhere? Yeah, right here. Find this gentleman. He'll get you set up if you are interested in participating. I think they're taking some pre-registrations. They're certainly interested in sponsors and other folks from the corporate and business community that want to participate. So it really is another one of those things that is demonstrating, really truly how strong this region is, how well it's working together, and we want to maintain that leadership position. That said, as I said this morning, at the biggest of the big region, we think kind of at a national and federal level. And so I'm going to ask Mike from NNF to come up and introduce his guests from Cisco and from Department of Homeland Security.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for turning out today. Really great turnout. Want a huge shout out to John Holden for pulling all this off in a short time here. I previously worked with John and as the CTO at Stafford County, Virginia, and we were the co-founders of the Virginia Smart Community Testbed, and we have actually 3 of our 4 founders here today. David Erie, too, if you saw him at one of the A sessions, if you can stand up for a sec, just want to give you a shout out, too. Anyway, we did a lot of interesting, innovative technologies there. I've since left Stafford County, and now I'm working for NFF. We are a network integrator founded in 1996. We are a Cisco Gold partner, 3rd largest in the Mid-Atlantic. And we have built a cyber practice, and now I'm building a smart technologies practice for them. So stop by our booth. We have a booth out there. And Chris Peabody is our chief development officer and does all of our strategy development and business development. And we are co-sponsoring with Cisco, so I want to give a huge shout out to Cisco, Betsy, Josh, and Liz. So thank you and stop by and see them. They're at the front table there. And also wanted to introduce our distinguished guests. So first, want to just mention too that you saw Alex Clark on the agenda. He had a family emergency, so we have a pinch hitter here. Kyle Connor is our pinch hitter. He is also formerly with Cisco, spent 15 years at Cisco, and I'll read his bio real quick, and then I'll have each of them introduce themselves. And then Dan Cotter was a key contributor to our test bed and is extraordinary individual with all he's done at Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Division. There he is the dictorate for that division of Department of Homeland Security. His prior positions included science and technology in the Homeland Security area, enterprise, and first responders group. He also has some private sector experience too, working with LIDAR, a company that made LIDAR and flood zone determination firm, and also was a fellow at the American Association of Advancement of Science in 2005. And has the presidential Rank Award, and was one of the nation's highest awards for career members of the Senior Executive Service. And then Kyle, like I mentioned, has been with Cisco. He has over 25 years of IoT experience. He has mostly in the transportation area, so we're going to be talking a lot about transportation today. And, you know, if any of you experiencing traffic today, yeah, we could certainly use some improvements here. There are obviously worse places in the country, but with the growth here, yeah, transportation's critical, and there was that big announcement yesterday for the region, and so good stuff there. And Kyle has recently formed a EV charging company. So if you're in the market for EV stuff, another great resource. So, and Kyle has an EE degree from Texas Tech. So we're going to focus a lot on the federal role that the federal government can play in building smart regions, smart communities. And so I'm going to start with Dan and ask him, well, first of all, to introduce yourself, and then I'll ask Kyle to introduce himself, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Hi, I'm Dan.
Go ahead and take your microphone. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dan. Yeah, I started my life as a hydrologist, actually. Spent a long time working for FEMA, the National Flood Insurance Program, a lot of disaster operations. I went to the private sector for a bit after 9/11, kind of found my way back into the federal government. Was the chief technology officer for DHS for a bit, and came over to science technology in 2012, where I've had the chance to work with a lot of the folks, you know, in this room in the Virginia test bed over the last several years. So it's been a great experience.
Thank you. And Kyle?
Yeah, thank you all for allowing me to step in and fulfill the shoes for Alex Clark. He and I have worked for a long time together, but he did have a family emergency. So I just recently left Cisco. They actually asked me to have this speaking slot before I left, but I decided to do my own startup in EV charging. So prior to that, at Cisco, I was responsible for, as was mentioned, IoT transportation globally. So very excited to be here. The team I was on at Cisco was responsible, as our keynote mentioned earlier, around validated designs, and it was all around connected communities. We actually released our connected communities validated design, I think it was like 2017 initially. And it was all around connected roadways, intersections, how the bus rapid transit could come together and the city could be better. And then we looked at citywide Wi-Fi, cameras, and water management systems. So really excited to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And we're thrilled to have you here, too. So the first question I'm going to pose to Dan, it's really two parts. You know, please tell us about your background and what exactly you're doing at DHS, and then why does DHS care about smart cities and smart communities?
Yeah, thank you. So DHS Science Technology is a really interesting place to work. We're kind of the research arm for the department, and one of the things I really like about it is just the variety of missions that you get involved in. You know, for those of you who might watch the Deadliest Catch and, you know, high Arctic search and rescue that the U.S. Coast Guard does, you know, there's a lot of issues there with situational awareness, high Arctic communication, a whole lot of interesting issues there. United States Secret Service, do a lot with them, protective missions, you know, detection, those types of activities. Our Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, you know, something that I think has been touched on a lot today. You know, what do we need to do as a nation for cyber resiliency? What are we trying to do at the federal level? Of course, I mentioned the Federal Emergency Management Agency, a tremendous amount going on there. We also have our Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. You know, they're very interested in moving new training techniques, AR, VR, other types of environments. United States Citizen Immigration Service, the potential uses of AI in particular to help with validation of paperwork, naturalization processes is tremendous. And I'm sure everybody's encountered the Transportation Security Agency. You know, is there a future where you just kind of walk to the gate and everything's invisible to you? Why are you laughing at me?
No,
we're on the stage. You're supposed to be an ally. And our Counters Weapons of Mass Destruction Organization, nuclear detection, biothreats, you know, those type, you know, the really scary stuff. So it's a really interesting, you know, place to work and an opportunity to work with a lot of different technologies and try to support a lot of really important missions. So you asked, why is smart cities, smart communities important to us? So I think from our view, the health and resilience of our nation is really dependent on what happens at the local level. You know, this country runs at the local level. It doesn't run at the federal level. States are great, but really, you know, it's happening at the local level. Smart communities, as you implement IoT, systems of systems, things enabled by 5G and coming 6G. There's been a lot of talk in these types of senses here, data analytics, you know, what's the future AI. I mean, these are all things that can make our local communities more efficient. They can make them more safer, you know, economically more viable, just driving the engines of, you know, our democracy. From a DHS standpoint, from an emergency management standpoint, you know, the ability to share information better, to have better situational awareness with you, I think really has driven things leaps and bounds when the federal government does get involved. Our ability to work at the local level, understand the requirements, and effectively integrate after a major hurricane or flood disaster. I'm not saying things are perfect, but they're a whole lot better than they were back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, you know, the ability to share information and have situational awareness of what's needed with, you know, with local communities is tremendous. But at the same time, since because today's, you know, these technologies that we're adopting that are really enabling our society in so many different ways, you know, they're also creating all kinds of different threats and vulnerabilities, creating new attack surfaces. They're creating new ways for adversaries really to impact us. So again, we have a very strong interest in working with you, not only the beneficial aspects of emerging technologies, but trying to understand with you, you know, what are the adversarial aspects of it, and how can we work to mitigate, you know, those with you? How can the federal government provide leadership, grant funding, and other types of work, you know, to bring the community together? David Erie mentioned the quote from the FEMA director, for those of you in the A session earlier. I'd like to requote that again. So this is her speech to the National Emergency Management Association back in October, and I've been listening to FEMA directors speak for over 40 years. And typically what they talk about is emergency management, natural disasters, you know, how we're going to improve response, what we learned last hurricane season. And she took a hard turn. What she said, what keeps me up at night is the looming danger presented by nation-state threats to our homeland. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room. We're all like, well, that's news. You know, very different approach for FEMA. She talked about the how Homeland Security and National Security are really coming together. She talked about both cyber and physical attacks on our critical infrastructure. And she talked a lot about the disinformation campaigns being carried out by nation-state actors to undermine many of you in the room, you know, the local government authorities, critical infrastructure operators, things like that, and our need to pull together to work on these types of things. So we have a very, very strong interest in understanding the technologies that are being adopted at the local community level, both from the side of how does that enable us to work better with you to support you in times of need, but also what does the threat surface start to look like for this nation as this evolves, and what at the federal level should we be doing about it?
Thank you. One thing I forgot to mention, I just want to, if you can think about questions you may have, we're going to have a period of time where you can ask questions. We have 2 microphones there, so just save up your questions and we'll give you plenty of time to ask them. So we definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. And then next question I've got is some of the technologies you developed through DHS, like the flood sensors and wildfire smoke sensors, how are they improving public safety and benefiting the communities? And how did you take them from a lab to the real world with deploying them in local governments?
Sure, thank you. So, we have a lot of interest in sensor technology. What are the new and novel types of sensors that can be connected at the edge? They can give us early information, detect what's going on. I think all of you realize that, one of the biggest threats from natural hazards that we face in the country is flood. Traditionally, flood sensors have been full hydrometeorological station from the Corps of Engineers, Weather Service. You're talking tens of thousands of dollars. So we took a look, can we get more types of sensors out there, developing a low-cost flood sensor, something available at the fraction of the cost, probably allow people to densify their networks, have a better understanding of floods. So that's something that we ran, that we worked this through the Smart Cities Testbed with the state of Virginia through a partnership we have with the Virginia Innovative Partnership Corporation. And, we started out with 3 or 4 different providers. We down selected to one over a couple of years. It's now a commercialized product. There are hundreds of these things out there. Just some of the examples, Kentucky Dam Safety is using them around the high-risk dams to get them early detection of when something might start to fail. Some of you may have heard about flash floods in Ellicott City, Maryland, a place where we lost some lives. So deployed in that community, other places around the country. And kind of leading into the wildland fire sensor in California, in places where you've had wildfire burns, there's no longer the vegetation there to drain water. So you end up with a much more serious flash flood and mudslide situations. So deploying in those types of places. And the idea is that these things connect, typically if they're remote, they're solar powered, they connect by radio, cellular, or some other means, depending on how far away they are. And the idea is to get that early warning to somebody who can do something about it. It may be as simple as closing a low water gate or turning a light on at a low water crossing so people don't drive their vehicles into it and drown, to running the sirens and trying to revive an evacuation alert. The wildfire sensors are a much more complicated type of game. They're actually looking for the first chemical and particulate signature of wildfire ignition. The idea, if you can get early suppression, we can avoid some of these huge conflagrations that we're seeing. Certainly the Maui disaster, Paradise, increasingly we're seeing on the East Coast. Wildfires are driven by climate change. We're seeing more and more of them. So right now we're kind of in the beta stage of those sensors. We have them in tests with a number of communities. We've had some success with the community in Colorado had done a preemptive burn, and when they put it out, left the site, they left the sensor behind, and it showed the burn re-erupted a few hours later. They were able to get out there and put it out before something more serious happened. But the issue of wildfires is really becoming tremendous in this country. If we can combine early detection with better alerts and warnings, we can save a lot of lives, prevent a lot of property damage. You asked kind of the how piece. So I describe these things as public-private partnerships, but kind of with 3 legs and a supporting element. So one leg is an organization like mine where we're researchers, but we don't own the mission. We don't necessarily understand the use case. So we need a community, a partner who's willing to step and say, yeah, we'll be your experiment partner. We'll take these sensors, we'll install them, we'll operate them, we'll give you feedback on them. And then we need the research community. We need the innovator who's going to bring that technology together and work with us over a period of a couple of years as we go from prototype to alpha to beta to field test commercialization. In many instances, though, we also need the investor. A lot of what we do at the HS Science Technology, but also I think at universities, other research organizations, it can very easily end up on the shelf if we don't find companies who are great innovators, but also are able to team them with people who have the capital to allow them to get beyond sort of the prototype phase. We'll develop a prototype. We may do some low rate production, but we don't fund that full commercialization aspect. And that's one of the things when we talk about the Stafford County test bed, and we've heard from David earlier, a little bit earlier, that we look for partners who can try to bring us end users with use cases and technologists, but also something that's going to help us with that commercialization piece.
Yeah, if I could just add too, while I was working at Stafford, we were able to deploy 15 of these flood sensors throughout the county, and then DHS added more throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think we have about 110 of them, and each county's now doing their own innovative thing and sharing what they're doing. So we used it for doing alerting through email so that emergency management would be alerted when a flood condition occurred. And you'll see a little still picture. You can set different thresholds for flooding so that you'll be alerted depending on how badly a road is flooded, so you can close it down. We were working on tying it in with Waze. But other communities are doing it too, and it's all going through a single dashboard for Virginia Department of Emergency Management. So they're helping to coordinate what all the counties are doing and cities across the Commonwealth. And it's been, I think, a great success story. The other thing is what DHS did was take something that was costing around $40,000, I believe, for flood sensing, really old technology that that National Weather Service was using, and building something for about $5,000 a device, and can run off of solar, so you don't have to have power, and it also runs off of 4G LTE. So as long as you've got a signal, you can get the data, and it's not a large amount of data that's being transmitted, so works really well. So next question, I've got to give Kyle some time here. So Kyle, if you can kind of share with us what you've done with public-private partnerships and how you see that being critical in the transportation space.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to go back to your comment about being able to get on an airplane without a lot of. I think it's amazing that there are still paper printers running off an entire manifest, but the TSB and the NTSB requires it. The TSA and the NTSB require it. You have to have a paper manifest, and we're trying to get to digital access, and it really does slow things down. But that's the type of thing we're trying to get into and make more modern and make more efficient, and yet still keep it secure. I got into transportation because I looked at technology and transportation specifically. When technology goes wrong in transportation, at a bare minimum, we impact people's livelihood, and then oftentimes we lose life. So you had to look at things and say, how can we impact this better, but always keep safety at the forefront? The experimental stuff is good, and I think we need to do proof of concepts and experiment. And I love the fact that someone like DHS is out there doing that, and then we can leverage that knowledge. But when we deploy at scale throughout a city, these citizens are expecting us to do it in a safe manner and allow them to get to work and home reliably without risk of life, if at all possible. So, and transportation is one of the areas that we lose a lot of it. We lose 1 million people on the roads every year. We lose a lot of people that we don't always talk about in transportation. And so trying to find ways to prevent wrong-way drivers, or at least notify people if there's a wrong-way driver, trying to find ways to automatically control trains so that they don't derail in speed zones, right? These are the types of things that we really had to try to look at, and then not come up with an experiment, come up with something foundational. So I worked with Cisco for years. A lot of it was you need a reliable, secure network, right? So you're going to put this out there. It can't fail. It has to be reliable. And then we've talked about this throughout the entire morning. When you're collecting this much data, it has to be secured. It has to be protected from other people, and yet shared with the right people. So I looked at transportation a long time ago as one of the cutting areas that a smart city or a smart community would need to improve. When Cisco first got into smart cities, everyone was talking about everything from trash cans to lights to this, that, or the other thing. And I think at the end of the day, we finally honed in and said, let's use the natural network that's in place. The roadways, the trains, they're there. They're already putting intersections together. They're trying to connect them. That's a fiber optic path. Let's use that. Let's do something more with it. And then once you have a foundational use case, like connected intersections, you can do all the fun wingding stuff, right? You can come back and have the overlay interesting projects. But you have to have something that's foundational that a city can maintain and pay for long term, and it has a real business outcome. I don't mean to repeat this morning's keynote, but he had some really great points throughout it, which was you have to have your business outcome in mind first. If you don't, you're coming up with great experiments. And like I said, I love experiments. I'm a technologist. I think they're great. And I think we've come up with some amazing things like LiDAR out of experiments. But at the end of the day, we really do rely on taxpayers' money to figure out good, safe solutions. So that's kind of where I got into this, and that's how I focused in this space.
So it's also a little bit more about some of the transportation projects.
Absolutely.
Worked on with Cisco and are working on.
Sure. Up in Ohio, Central Ohio Transportation Authority, working with their busing system. And they were looking to get new vehicle data. They want to be able to maintain their fleet better. So vehicle data is a real thing. It has a real cost associated with them in the city. And they wanted to be able to do put cameras on the vehicles in case of an emergency event. But every city we know of always wants to offer free Wi-Fi. Well, free Wi-Fi is a very hard ROI, right? It's free. It's a cost. But when you say, I'm going to put in a camera, which has real security implications, right, safety implications, and then you say, I want to put in vehicle data, which has fuel cost and tire maintenance implications, those are a baseline foundation, and you're able to go forward and say, now I want free Wi-Fi. So in Cotter, citizens now get on the bus rapid transit. They have a faster route down the intersection because the bus is actually talking to the intersection saying, I'm coming, please let me through quicker. The bus actually has more safety on board. The people feel safer. The one way to get us out of our own cars every day is you got to make public transit more attractive, right? Not just for those who have to use it, but for those who want to use it. So safety is a big factor. And then vehicle data, like I said. So we were able to take a project like that and combine two foundational functions and then add in the wingdings over and above. In Miami, there's a couple of companies that are coming together. You mentioned public-private partnerships. In Miami, there's a couple of companies coming together, and they're creating new bus corridors, 6 or 7 new bus corridors all coming together. And it's all being done with privatized money. They're changing how the face of Miami is going to work, and they're doing it in an accelerated project because they're not held back by the bureaucracy of a traditional transportation entity. So, and they're coupling up with smart lighting in the same breath, right? So you have a couple of different companies, forgive me, I'll probably get them wrong down there, but they have a couple of different companies that are getting together, and they're saying, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to change how transportation works so that the community can attract better investments, better technology, better citizens at the end of the day. And it really is making a big impact. So those are probably two of the big ones. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. I'm working around the world in different projects at airports and so forth, but those are two that are very notable because they created a project based with an outcome and a real business need that was sustainable, year over year over year. A lot of us can find a grant to do something, but not to keep the something going, right? So you got to say, okay, well, I got to keep my intersections connected no matter what. Now let's add on Wi-Fi for the citizens because it comes with it, right? So.
And with that Ohio project, it also helped with digital inclusion too, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Right? I mean, that's a big part of it, getting broadband access to people that are on a bus. That's an extra 20 or 30 minutes each way that they are able to search for a job. That's an extra opportunity for them to communicate with their kids or do their homework, whatever the case is. It absolutely changes that digital divide.
Yeah, great. And then from what you see in the Research Triangle area, what do you see are as opportunities? Obviously, there was a big announcement yesterday, but what do you see are some of the biggest opportunities?
I'm biased. I live here. I think this city's great. I don't think it needs a lot of improvement. But in all fairness, no, I would like to see light rail, to be fair. I think light rail would be a big improvement. It takes 30 minutes on a commuter rail to get from Cary to here, and it takes about 8 minutes in a car. So again, it doesn't make that attractive for a lot of people to want to go over there and get on a train and come over here. A light rail type solution would be huge in this area. Unfortunately, as I was speaking with somebody earlier, a lot of our roads are built on farm roads, if you will, so they're not exactly straight and narrow, and they have unique jurisdiction lines they follow, so it's difficult. But I think things like a light rail or a community-wide interoperable transit system, I think those are big things that change that digital divide, the equity. They bring people together and they allow their livelihood to be improved. Absolutely. I don't have a specific, like, hey, this one intersection needs better timing of lights. I mean, I have one near my house. I would like to have better timing, but I don't think that's a citywide
problem. I'm sure we all have our favorite intersection. Or
it's not a citywide problem. It's just a me to work
no potholes,
problem.
Sorry. No. So obviously cybersecurity plays a critical role with all of this, and Dan, I thank you for bringing that up earlier. CISA has identified that protecting critical infrastructure is a national priority, and as Dan said, the FEMA director mentioned that as well, Secretary. So what should be done to protect transportation systems, in your opinion? I'll let you both answer that one.
You want to go first? I'll take the first tab. There we go. I will go back to a foundational enterprise-grade system. All too often, as Cisco, we would go out and we would talk to customers, and if many of you don't know, there's a number 2 key you can buy on eBay for about $6, and it gets you into a lot of roadside cabinets. And roadside cabinets are where you can basically stop a city if you turn all the lights the wrong color at the wrong time, right? So we looked at it and said, you've got to have a layer of connectivity. And we'd open these cabinets up and you'd find devices that you would literally buy from Best Buy, connecting these intersections. And there is no cybersecurity layer on them. So I think first and foremost, get an enterprise-grade network. And I don't work at Cisco anymore, so that's not me saying buy from me. That's me saying I believe truly that if you can see all of the assets on your network, you can manage them and secure them. If you don't know what your assets are because somebody just plugged something in to make that thing work, you just added a huge level of penetration of your security system right there, which goes back to reliability, which goes back to safety. So I would say start with a highly reliable network that is securable based on enterprise-grade stuff. There's a lot of companies out there that do it. I think Cisco does a great job of it, by the way, of course. But I think you definitely want to start there. Don't try to mom and pop this. The other one I would say is make sure your IT departments are tied in. If you're a transportation operator, make sure your IT department, there's the OT and IT, right? The people who run the vehicles and run the roads, and then there's the people that run the technology that help support it. A lot of times you find a conflict, right? The IT-OT convergence isn't there. The cities are fighting themselves to some extent. It's my money, or it's my technology, my ownership. You really got to break that down. And this conference is all about sharing of technology. Even within a city, we'd like to do it amongst city to city, or city to state, or state to state. But even within a city, the silos exist. So trying to break that down, I think, is a big starting point.
Thank you. You used one of my favorite words, reliability. Too often when we look at these types of complex systems, we look at individual components and we test for availability. We look at mean time between failures, but we're really not looking at that whole system and saying, is it going to do what you want to do? I mean, for the Coast Guard, there's a big difference. You're saying, is my cutter available on the dock versus does it have the reliability to go out and complete a 3-week mission with having to board earlier? I think that's just a really important point. From where we stand in the kind of the science technology, we're looking a little bit, well, not too far into the future. The cyber vulnerabilities in self-driving cars, and the automated systems that control things, but also thinking multimodal, not just about our vehicle infrastructure, but our trains, our airborne infrastructure, our shipping infrastructure. How do we operate our ports? I just got back from the conference out in Long Beach. How do we operate these ports and what are their vulnerabilities? So I think it's a very big space. CISA and TSA are very much, kind of looking into these things. But the technology is just advancing incredibly fast, and to gain the efficiencies, they're being adopted. And I think we've got a challenge as a nation, as we heard earlier, to kind of keep up with the adoption of technology with security built in.
It can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of day one foundation, right? A lot of people try to come back and say, well, we'll get something working and then we'll add security. And all too often that gets lost or doesn't get implemented correctly. So again, to the point, if you can break down the conversation between IT and OT, the IT person's going to make sure there's security. So if you break down that conversation, you have a trusted person in your organization who will probably make sure it's done right. But I think that's a big part of it first, is breaking down the politics, then you can break down the technology itself.
So this is a little bit off script, but Dan, one of the really cool technologies I know DHS has worked on is border security with scanning the undercarriages of vehicles. Do you want to describe that a little bit? I think that was really fascinating what you're saying.
Sure. So traditionally, you may have driven across some. You put some type of scanner, a video photography device, and the vehicle drives across it. It takes a picture. It gets transmitted to a station. A guy looks at it for a couple of seconds. A lot of these times, whether it's a vehicle inspection, something else, the Border Patrol agent, the Customs agent, they get seconds to make a decision, right? And how much help can we give them that time? Anyway, so they get an image, and what do I do with it, right? Something obvious, you make a move on, and maybe the car can move at 5 miles an hour going across it. So one of the things that we worked on is something called the Vehicle Inspection Early Warning System, VIEW. And the idea was, I didn't bring one with me, but, essentially smartphone type of camera technology, very cheap, very reliable, get as much better, higher definition looks. Essentially something to build kind of a 3D of the undercarriage in real time. It speeds up to 25 miles an hour, be able to get that to a station, and with anomaly detection. Can you there's the as-built drawings out there and understanding from the automotive manufacturers, do rapid comparison, look for something different. If the same vehicle is going back and forth across the border, some frequency, maintain that library and look for differentiations. So that's, again, a technology that we've completed, it's tested. It's installed at a few border crossings with Customs and Border Protection, and actually at the DHS headquarters campus, there's one. So it's a type of technology that, it's not so much knowledge, it's just an integration of what's available today, but trying to think about things in a different way and apply it to a hard mission.
I think you made a good point. It's not always just about the technology, but also about the integration. You have to have a broad partner ecosystem. You can't do it by yourself. There's not one company, there's not one entity that has all the knowledge, has all the sensors, has all the software. Great people. I walk through a lot of these booths outside. It really takes almost all of them to come up with a smart and connected community. It's not just, oh, this guy's widget and that guy's thing and this person's dashboard. It takes the whole system. So I really encourage you to have more events like this, where you can get those like-minded people together and try to figure out how you can come up with a solution, not a point fix. That would be my only other part of that, is the ecosystem, like you said, you got to integrate it all together.
And another off-script question. So, Kyle, and it'll be for both of you too. Autonomous vehicles, we hear all about them. When are they going to become just ubiquitous in our community, and can we walk across the street safely? Can we avoid the collisions with them?
So in some countries they already are, right? In some countries you already have autonomous corridors that allow fully autonomous operated vehicles driving right next to manned vehicles. I've been doing an experiment for the last 3 years with Cisco on the Indy Autonomous Challenge, where we actually take Indy cars and we go 200 miles an hour and we race each other actively. If you get a chance, it's streamable on AWS. You can go Google IndyCar Challenge. It's really, really cool. But universities from around the world are writing the software that drive these vehicles. And once the vehicles are off, they're off, and they're racing on their own. And yes, we do wreck vehicles. That's the first question everyone asks is, do they ever wreck? They do wreck. But what we realized was, and the reason for it, one of the main impetuses of this particular competition was to familiarize people with autonomous vehicles. We all see the bread boxes that go 20 miles an hour, and we're like, okay, my father wouldn't get in one. He's like, I won't get in that. And then I showed him really cool race cars going 200 miles an hour. And he's like, this is the coolest thing ever. And it was adoption. You had to get somebody to break the mindset that it's cool and interesting. Tesla did it with electric vehicles, right? You got to get people to change from it's not cool to it's very cool. And then we turn around and say, if I can race two cars 200 miles an hour, literally we're going 200 miles an hour, and they're not hitting each other, getting you to and from the grocery store is going to be much more realistic in your neighborhood, right? So we're trying to debunk the fear factor of it, but to when is it going to occur? I don't have a crystal ball that good. I wish I did. I wish it was tomorrow, because I hate driving. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to some of the researchers I talked to. They're like, oh, this is great. I'm not going to have to buy my kid a car. I'm never going to have to teach them how to drive, because it's all going to be autonomous vehicles by 2030, 2035. And I'm thinking, I'm probably still going to be driving by then. That may scare a lot of you, right? And what's going to mean when you get a 90-year-old guy like me on the road with these systems? What does that blending look like? What does that transition look like? And the fear factor, I think we see this in so many areas. So we lose 30, 40,000 people a year to traffic accidents, right?
In the United States.
But what you hear about on the front page is the one where the Tulsa did something wrong or something, and that type of anecdotal fear really just, I think, drives public policy more than it should, and not just in this space. I mean, in a lot of other science spaces, you see that where anecdotal information, tends to get to the forefront, way above systematic and other types of information that we need to make policy decisions. So the short story is, I don't know.
I would tell you, when we looked around and we said, where's the adoption problem? It's basically people just a little older than me through the baby boomers, right? So the older you get, the quicker you are to adopt it. The older you get, the quicker you are to adopt it. That's what we found, is because people lose their mobility. They can't see as well at night. They still want to be able to go, right? So
I'm still processing whether I'm insulted or not.
It's okay. You're not.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make it clear. I'm not insulting you personally, just your people. No. Just generally. No. But once you get to a certain age, you adopt it, and then at a certain age, under like basically just younger than me, you're like, I grew up with an iPad in my hand, so the adoption is there, and Teslas have been around. So I think there's a very small window of people that are not adopting it, and it could accelerate very quickly as we get those baby boomers turning into more of the older clientele. They really want that mobility, right? It's the same freedom we all got when we were 16 and we could go see our friend. They still want that mobility when it's all said and done. So I think the adoption could come fast as that huge population of baby boomers gets just a little bit older.
And maybe the autonomous golf cart for the retired community.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to practice my stink eye since my last daughter moved out of the house. So
I'll give you several.
Thank you for that.
All right. I'd love to open this up to the audience. So we have 2 microphones in the middle. So please step up. Don't be shy. I'm sure you must have some questions. All right.
And
first taker.
Are you good?
I'm good. Are you good?
We're good now.
Thank you guys for being here. I'm curious to get back to existing infrastructure lines. Like, are there other legacy infrastructure in cities that you're noticing that we might be able to enhance? That, I don't know, doesn't necessarily mean implementing new technology, just repurposing.
You want to take a stab?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Existing infrastructure, repurposing it? Are you talking about IT infrastructure or what?
Yeah, Dan, you were talking about the View device that you know, is using camera technology.
Yeah. So if you've talked about repurposing existing technology, right now my favorite is, we've moved to digital TV signals, right? The packet that's going out, the broadcast doesn't need that full amount. I'm going to say it's 16 megabytes, and maybe they use 12. So we're working on data casting right now, and it's actually pretty well implemented where, allowing public safety to use the rest of that so they can carry video, other things on to manage a local incident. That frees up, cellular LTE, FirstNet for other text communication. We're also working with the Corporation Public Broadcasting to carry essentially iPause alerts on that signal. So if you can get the alerts out on a TV signal, you much broader coverage than you have in a cellular signal. And you saw in Maui, for example, we don't have the full after action report. We really don't know everything that happened. But one of the critiques seemed to be that maybe the cell towers went down early to get their signal. If you're on TV broadcast, that makes an incredible difference. Okay, now how many have a TV connected to an antenna anymore? Good for you. I like you. You insulted him too earlier.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it again.
Yeah. So how do you get over that? And there are devices you can buy like that are similar to a National Weather Service radio. But we're also experimenting with, can we carry the 3GPP signal on that TV broadcast signal? If we can do that, we can get it to your 5G phone. These are technologies that exist at least in the lab today. So that's the type of thing where if we can reuse, this ubiquitous TV digital signal, maybe we can change how alerts and warnings work in this country, and that could save a lot of lives.
Yeah, I would only add to that, along the same lines, we have thousands of traffic cameras around the United States. Adding video analytics to it is
giving you tickets.
Adding video analytics to give you a ticket is not horribly hard, so you can use existing infrastructure. The kicker is there is a lot of bandwidth that's required to backhaul all of that, to get it to the cloud, to do the analytics. So you really do want an edge compute function, as we were talking about earlier in the keynote, right? So as people upgrade, you can go to an edge compute, but take all the existing assets that are out there and at least start doing some analytics with the video you do have available without having to refresh the entire nation's camera system. So it's a little bit of a hybrid there.
Council member.
Yeah, just to share some insight and a question. So a few weeks ago, I had the honor of interviewing John Chambers, former CEO and chairman of Cisco, for about 30 minutes, just catching up. I wrote an article on TechWire, so you can go find it. But, he had the main things about AI, right? I mean, out of the 16 companies that he's invested in, the 3 AI companies he's invested in are all billion-dollar companies today. So he's advising all of his portfolio companies to have an AI strategy. And when I asked John, what does that mean? He said, well, find your primetime applications, figure out how it fits into your business model, and then, it's a tremendous opportunity for startups. That's really my question is, following on what John has said, where do you see AI fitting into smart city strategies? And, what kinds of opportunities do you see on the horizon, even within our own ecosystem in North Carolina? Especially starting with Cisco, because I know you work for Cisco.
I appreciate it. It's a good question. As you heard in the keynote earlier this morning, you did a great job keying up all of my major points, so thank you. AI has been around for a long time. It's not new. It's just generative, and it's cool, and it's fun again, right? So I think there have been companies out there doing traffic signal planning and signal flow using AI for years. The question is what are we doing with this new fun stuff that's very interactive, very real time, and at the edge, right? I'm going to go back to the foundational stuff. Those are very cool, and I think they will change how our world interacts, how a traffic light holds the green or holds the red because we have someone moving across the intersection slower. I think that's critical, and that is an AI function, right? But again, I think that's the secondary thing. The first thing is you got to have a secure network for that AI to run on. You got to have a reliable device at the edge for that AI to run on. So we've been given a generational moment in transportation, and sorry, I know I'm a transportation person, but we've been given a generational moment. We've never seen this kind of funding come out of the government before. I was in a meeting with the CEO of Amtrak. He said, I'm getting more money in the next 3 years than I've gotten in the past 30 combined, right? So while I love if they turned around and put all the new Acela vehicles on an AI generative, track, I'd much rather they really go back and make the electrification down the track better, or the track safety or the level crossings on the track better. So the AI, I think, will come. I think it's inevitable. I think we're all seeing that coming at us. I think it's a matter of making sure it's done with good parameters and good protection and guardrails around it. Because when you turn all the lights in Manhattan red, the stock market crashes right away, right? I mean, when something changes drastically and we're not expecting it, people go into fight or flight mode. And AI has that potential to really turn people off if it's done wrong. So I think first and foremost, if you have cybersecurity, then you don't have to worry about the AI person being an outside bad player. You just are now doing it internally, and you're actually trying to come up with the real outcomes.
So let me address it maybe first from sort of a generic DHS perspective, and then talk a little bit about some of the use cases that we're interested to get down to local level in particular. The first thing that we're really focused right now are trusted and responsible use of AI. How do you really know you can trust these systems? How do you know that they're staying on target? So we can go into ChatGPT, some of the other line things. I don't know who built that foundational model. I mean, these things are very much black box. How do you assure that over time, that you're getting consistent results, that over time the types of questions or data being entered into these models aren't introducing some type of bias that's going to hurt you and contaminate your results? You talk in cyber about continuous monitoring of your cyber environment to make sure that you're secure. What's the future equivalent of that? And these models are very, very expensive to build. Is our future where most people are relying on an AI model that's off-prem, that you really don't have control over, that's a black box? How are you going to trust that? And what happens if you get disconnected from it and you're reliant on that? So we're working a lot with the National Institute of Standards and Technology on standards. We're thinking a lot about how do you test AI systems. I mean, if it's an AI, is it going to be smart enough to know the test answers and cheat? You end up in a lot of these weird conversations. But at the departmental level, we do have real focus on trusted and trustworthy use of AI, responsible use, looking at standards, understanding how to test them. In the work I do, getting down, more related to local level, thinking particularly about what generative AI might be able to do for the emergency management community. So helping develop mitigation and preparedness plans. I think that's a key issue. At our national labs, there are these phenomenal models, about climate change, all these other things, but they're expert models. How do we get expert models in the hands of local emergency managers to build better mitigation plans? Early warning, I think, could be something combined with the sensors that we do with AI. Scenario and simulations, decision support. Of course, AI has been talked about. AI ops is becoming pretty common, I think, particularly in the IT world. And AI supported public safety answering points. We make the 911 call. If there's kind of an AI agent listening in on that, there are people experimenting with things like, can it early detect that the person calling is a stroke victim or something else is going on? Can it take an early action to start managing and dispatching resources? Can we cut a couple of minutes off of average response times nationwide? I think those are very powerful types of AI uses that we're starting to look into at the department.
And we have another question.
Thank you. So keying off the word federal and title federal imperative, the U.S. imperative for smart cities, smart regional, and Kyle, to your comment about there are countries that already have autonomous corridors and other technologies. And in the U.S., we're really good at technical innovation. But how would you rate or rank us, the U.S., in terms of execution and maturity of implementation relative to other countries?
So you said you wanted to answer that? No. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. And an AI divides into so many segments. A lot of what I see at the department is the impacts of adversarial AI on us and the threats that we're seeing. And you tend to be like, oh man, they're way ahead of us. On the other hand, our national labs, NIST, what the private sector companies in the U.S. are doing, is amazing. When I travel internationally and I work with international organizations, there's a large tendency to look to the U.S. as leaders in virtually any technology, including AI. And that's not necessarily just looking at the federal government, but looking at the strength and power of our industry. So I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know if maybe there's one out there. But I worry very much about what our adversaries may be doing with AI and that we're not keeping up enough. But boy, I get a lot of faith in the brilliance of the people that we work with in this country, public and private sector. And just on my worry piece, let me just kind of add a data point for you. So you're all familiar with Moore's Law, right? That, every 2 years or so you get crammed enough transistors on a chip, it doubles. So I think with Stanford a couple of years ago, they did an analysis of AI. They said AI processing power is doubling every 3 to 4 months. So how do you keep up with that, right? And we worry, if our threat vectors are increasing exponentially, and we're kind of over here figuring out the next incremental thing we're going to do to protect our network, right? Is that good enough? So anyway, sorry, again, a non-answer, but I'm worried, but I feel good about it, I think.
Right. I tend to agree. Here in the United States, we're amazing at developing technology. Adopting is a lot harder. Adoption tends to follow the value of life curve. In a community that your value of life is low, you're easy to adopt, right? So here in the United States, we have a very high value of life. We consider each citizen a very valuable person, right? So we don't just go put out things on the roadway that are not safe. You have to go through auto crash safety testing if you're an OEM and you build a car, right? We don't have $7,000 BYD electric vehicles here, even though there are $7,000 electric cars running in parts of Asia. But it's because of that value of life. Here, we're very, very clear on the value of life. The constituents have had our voice, which requires more testing, more proof of concepting, more delay in deployment. So you can almost rate us based on value of life. If you find a new world, a new emerging country, there's not a huge infrastructure that they have to overcome, so they can easily adopt new technologies quicker. And they may not have the traffic conditions that we have, and they're not built on legacy systems. So you can almost find an inverse curve to value of life versus technology adoption, at least in transportation, but that might give you some place to look at it. I think we do it better, and I'm not saying that just like America's better, right? I'm saying like I think because we put that time and energy in it, we have the experts who are doing the studies and the safety parameters of it. I think ultimately when we deploy, it's very effective, but we're oftentimes 5 to 6 years late behind a lot of other leading countries that are just saying, I'm going to do it today. I mean, flying drones that hold people is a very big thing in other countries, and here let's start testing that, So it's if you really want to get to the next layer, you kind of have to say, I'm going to take the rails off, and that's hard here in the United States.
And I'd just add too, if any of you have ever been to the World Expo in Barcelona, you'll see the presence of countries around the world, and it is just mind-blowing, some of the things going on in Europe and Asia. So they've invested heavily, and they've done a lot of incredible deployments of technology. So,
yeah, a good example, all of Europe right now is changing their train control system. So we did what was called positive train control a decade ago or so. It was okay, it works a little bit, it's helpful. But in the rest of Europe, they're basically replacing their entire system with a private 5G network just for train control. So their adoption of both 5G and automated trains is going to be 10x what our adoption is, because we still have a lot of people, either between unions or labor laws or technology issues, we don't adopt it. So I think those are the kind of things you'll see. When countries get behind it, when the government gets behind the technology adoption, you go a lot faster. And here that tends to be our problem because of bureaucracy.
And we have another question.
Oh, yes. So first, I was at the Harley store. I saw a shirt that said 60's the new 30. So congratulations to you 32-year-olds up on the stage. I'm loving this.
You're talking to him.
Oh, so you're not even old enough to drive yet. That's why you're pushing autonomous vehicles.
That's right.
All right. So I've listened to this discussion go back and forth. And on one side, I hear a need for security. On the other side, I need speed for integration, new technology, and adoption. In between the two is threat and risk. You've articulated that very well. But yet we don't have any federal security integration centers to drive that solution set. Do you have any recommendations on where we would go or how we would drive that demand signal for security integration across vendors? Because everything right now is a vendor-independent solution, so to speak, and the security flaws come through integration.
So, interesting question. So there's certainly a lot of documentation out there and standards, recommended procedures, from the National Institute of Standard Technologies and efforts like that. We've done some work. We have something we call Swamp. It's a place where you can put your software in. It'll give you kind of an idea of security vulnerabilities. There's a lot of different test beds out there. But I wouldn't say there's any systematic national infrastructure, at least that I'm aware of. I mean, there's a lot of guidance out there. There's a lot of policy. And there's some specific test beds that you can employ. But I'm not aware of any national infrastructure.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There are a lot of test beds. There are a lot of people putting together trial environments, and they do integrations. So it's not just one or the other. They bring the different pieces together and they try it end to end. But I agree. I don't think we have for cybersecurity, namely for critical infrastructure, I don't think we have a good national scale plan. It is, you go figure out what works for you.
If I could just make a shout out to David Erie back there. He had worked on a coordination on IoT hardware-based security and software security, a company called My Devices, I believe, and out of the UK, and also some US companies like Enclave, which does hardware-based IoT security, Zero Trust. So there are some standards that are hopefully going to get out there to help, I believe it's for federal agencies primarily, so that when their procurement goes and buys things, they're going to know that this is certified as secure and something that should be bought versus something that may not be.
I will only add to that there is more and more verbiage in funding that requires cybersecurity. Like the NEVI grants that went out, the National EV Infrastructure Grants, one of the requirements is that you have to have cybersecurity. Unfortunately, no one defined what that is. They just said you have to have it. So some people are like, okay, I got it, or I don't. I have cellular cybersecurity. So I think the fact that it's in the grant and you had to prove it as a point, you had to say at least I have this, whatever this is a starting point. But I think we need more of that function forced through the funding mechanism, to be fair.
We have another question.
Yes, Ben Hitchings, UNC School of Government. As we talk about the different technologies and opportunities, we have to find a way to help elucidate the benefits for our decision makers, for them to understand. And one of the ways that is helpful in that regard is having good examples of communities, local governments, for example, in North Carolina, that are using AI in their work, are developing smart cities applications. And so this is a question both for the panel and for the audience. Do you know of interesting examples of local government in North Carolina using those tools. We are doing some research right now for a report we're preparing. So if you have good examples, I would love to hear from you today. Again, my name is Ben Hitchings. My email is hitchings, HITCHINGS, @sog.unc.edu, and would love to hear if y'all know of examples here, and if you don't, maybe they're interesting local government examples from elsewhere.
Yeah, we've got some work going on in Cary that you might be interested in.
Say it was Cary.
Yeah,
sure.
And again, I'll point to David Erie. I mean, it's Virginia, but it's only a border away, right? Where we've done quite a bit, with the state of Virginia. And there's other examples, but those are the two local that I have for you.
Yeah, I would totally echo that. The town of Cary, right around the corner, a lot of connected intersections, looking at signal prioritization, traffic signal preemption, based on traffic flow and conditions in the city. So that's probably the closest one from here that I'm aware of.
And Morrisville with their smart parks that I heard about earlier today in the A section. So take a look at their site too.
I would only go back to there are plenty of other communities that have other things going on, like pedestrian detection or worker safety zone detections. I can definitely go offline and show you some examples around outside of North Carolina.
And Raleigh's jumping into some things too that you'll hear about in the future. So, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the panel. You both mentioned throughout, even though we're talking about in general enablement of how cities can be empowered, including by the private sector, but all these mentions of bureaucracy that would stand in the way, unions, labor laws, paper manifests, right? And the list is endless that we all know about. What do you say to, or how do you provide for private entities, whether that's startup communities, innovators, venture funds that don't want to invest in these types of projects or public-private partnerships because they still see those bureaucracy barriers as just being too great or not worth their money?
Yeah, it's a tough problem, particularly the federal bureaucracy. The way we run acquisitions is not really set up, for the fast-moving technology world. I mean, from the time we get from, kind of a validated use case and a budget to get a contract award, that can be a year to 18 months. And by then we've seen, maybe 3 technology cycles in this day and age. So we've been trying to look at ways so we can work more flexibly. So again, the partnership we have with the Virginia Innovative Partnership Corporation, it gives us a way to say we have a general interest in sensors and put some funding there, and then allow them to kind of develop the use cases, and with our oversight, not independently. Want to let you think we let David and company run crazy, but with our oversight, actually identify people, help us make down selects and push a lot faster. We have something we call our Silicon Valley Innovation Program. And while it's physically located in Silicon Valley, it applies across the world. If you go on our website, you will find things. We're able to very rapidly award up to $500,000 for 4 6-month tranches, up to $2 million over 2 years, to work with certain companies in a very fast acquisition method. So we've been trying to kind of stretch the boundaries of federal acquisition. We also, for companies who don't want money, they just want a partnership, we can also engage in what's called the CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Act. It allows us to sign an agreement without competition that we're going to work together on something. We can exchange knowledge, but we can't exchange money with you, and we can work together to develop, unobtainium or something, and we negotiate the rights to that up front. So we have some mechanisms, but it's very difficult in the United States research environment right now. Our acquisition rules are just not set up, to allow us to move fast.
One of the creative things we did at the local level, because obviously we all deal with local procurement challenges, and we created a relationship with Virginia Innovation Partnership at Stafford County. So when we saw a company that brought something to the test bed that we wanted to replicate and bring throughout the county, it was treated as a government to government purchase, so we didn't have to competitively bid it. We could go directly to VIPC with a work order or task order and make the procurement that way. And that really streamlined how quickly we could bring these technologies out to the community.
I would add to that, I'll give you two other things. One, what we're all here for, right? If the city of Raleigh is invested in something, there are so many reciprocal agreements that the city of Raleigh can do that says, great, now Wake County can do the same thing. So you don't have to go through the same procurement method, right? You can attach on to the city of Raleigh or vice versa. And communities getting connected, right? Use those reciprocation agreements, use the proof of concepts that this town learned so that you don't have to go through that same process all over again. So getting together and actually working on smart cities as a service where you're buying a service from another city or trading a service to another city might be an option, so you can move faster because you're literally buying off of the head-end that's already deployed of your video detection system or whatever the case is, right? So use someone else's investment to propel your own would be one, and I think that's a lot of what we're trying to accomplish in here today is trying to figure out how to get people to get together to do that. The other one, a good example would be somebody like Dallas Area Rapid Transit. About 12 years ago, they lobbied the state to change the public-private partnership laws between the governmental agencies. And they were very successful to expedite public-private partnerships to overcome the bureaucracy issue. They did it initially under the guise of we want to, subcontract to a busing company that handles a rural part of the town that we don't go to. But the law was written such that now they can deploy telecom if that's what they want to do, and it's a public-private partnership agreement that is expedited and meant to get over the factors that they're not getting private equity because of the fears. So I would look for governmental agencies who have taken that really proactive step and say, let's find the programs that we can impact, that we can effect in our own states and see if that can help expedite it. So you might want to go look at DART and see how they got it done. I was paying attention to it a while ago, but they went through a huge lobbying effort with the state in a relatively, very conservative state, to be fair, right? So they went through a lot of it, but ultimately got public-private partnerships are a huge part of how that entity actually does a lot of their projects these days. So.
And I would also add sometimes economic development authorities can function somewhat autonomously and can make procurements separate from the normal, local government procurement regulations. So that could be another venue for being able to bring technology to your community. Next question.
Sure. And thank you both very much for your time. I think my question is along the line of, is there a recommended scorecard or framework that you recommend people take a look at to evaluate success? Like, we're here, we need to get there to measure our efforts across the board?
I'm not sure I follow your question. I'm sorry.
In other words, you want to use performance management and you want to be able to say, okay, how are we doing? You mentioned Europe. They're being, they're able to adopt new technologies. How do we know that we're progressing, and what are the appropriate metrics, so forth?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. First of all, you have to know your business outcomes that you're desiring and measure against them, right? This is the difference in maybe governmental versus how a business operates, but you go to a business commit and you say, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars, and here are my stage gates along the way, and we all agree to it, and you move forward. And municipalities do that to some extent, but it's a little bit more encumbered over a longer planning period and those types of things. I think if you have clear outcomes, then you can put clear measurables against it. It's when you did your poll earlier today, the unknowns, I don't have clear outcomes, we're still in the 50-60% line. So there's no way to metric that if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. Very clearly, very distinctly. You can always metric, hey, we did more than we expected, that's great. But really putting metrics, you have to have a very clear definition of what you're trying to achieve. I don't know, that's probably the best I can come up with.
I like maturity models. Are you surprised? Yeah.
I earned that one.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for. There's a lot of them out there. And a lot of it depends on what you're focused on. Information sharing for emergency management's one of our big focus areas. We developed one. The incident management information sharing capability maturity model, very fancy name. There's another one out there I like a lot. SafeCom, it deals with safe communications and interoperability. What I really like about that maturity model, though, is that a lot of times the maturity model is focused on the technology. Where are you at with the tech, right? And the SafeCom model and the other things we've tried to do, they bring the aspect of how are you governing it? Because it's not, if it's just tech, it's not going to work. You need the governance piece, you need the training piece, you need the budget piece, essentially to be effective in any types of these large-scale technology adoption, you need all the C-suite people. You need the chief information officer, you need the chief acquisition officer, you need the chief human capital officer, because there's just so much involved in making those transitions. So I'd recommend to you maturity models a lot out there. You might want to build your own, but really look for one that has that makes you think hard and objectively about the governance aspect of it.
This will be the final question, Mr. Peabody.
And it'll be the best one. It's actually a comment, and John Holden may already be thinking about this, but people have brought up David Erie's name a couple times. You know, they built this test bed. And we're an IT company that decided we brought some partners together to do smart lighting and a company that paints fiber on the roadways. And David made me feel really good when I had to go back and ask him for money because we kept running into issues. Things like some of the lights had 440 volt electricity and the luminaires, the smart lights wouldn't work. We're an IT company. We don't know that. So when he said it's okay, we learn through challenges like this, and it's okay. And so for this region doing this, build a test bed where you can come in and it's okay to fail. You try things, and it's low risk. And we persevered, and we discovered things like, lights go off during the day, so suddenly the APs wouldn't have power, for Wi-Fi. It's like, yeah, that makes sense, So a test bed, John's probably already thinking something, but that was very helpful, and I just wanted to point that out because it's okay to fail.
Yep. Yeah. Great point. Thank you. And this concludes our session, but I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
I was just going to say, Dan and I are opening tonight at the Raleigh Improv. 7:30. Seats fill up fast. It is a 2-drink minimum, though. Okay? I know it's past his dinner time for sure. So, thank you.
But on a serious
That's why I
note,
won't be there when the bill's presented to Kyle. So.
Yeah. But on a serious note, they are going to stick around a little bit. So if you have any questions, feel free to interact with them after.